Judy, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you so much for speaking tonight.
Thank you, Gary. I would like to give you a little background of why I have picked up on Firewise. As a trainee in 2014, I was assigned to the Salcombe Garden, which is on Highway 12. They had this Firewise garden. I had no idea what it was about. I pursued finding information on it, and through kind of skeletonizing other people's ideas and also finding additional information outside of what had already been talked about, I came up with this presentation. My goal today will be more dealing with landscaping. Landscaping, the principles are lean, clean, or green. You may see these three rhyming words in different orders, but that is something to keep in mind when you're thinking about your home. What would you say if you had to live in an environment like this or had encountered one? Would you want your place to maybe survive? The whole thing is we cannot say that you will never be impacted by a wildfire, but you certainly can do a lot around your residence to ensure that maybe if you had one that wasn't very intense, that your place could survive. So today, what we're going to do is look at more fire resistance more than fire prevention. I want you to think about where you're living now and determine, are you going to need to incorporate some of these ideas into your landscaping? Or are you just going to kind of play it by ear? I always say it's interesting since we've had such a drastic droughting situation that a lot of people aren't interested yet in Firewise. But when it's a little bit closer to home, they tend to become more alert about the program. There's been a lot of information on the television about Firewise. Hopefully, through this presentation or what you see on TV, you will come out with a plan that will make your home more fire resistant. I am not going to discuss much about building construction and maintenance techniques. I am not a specialist in that, and so consequently, I won't be able to answer questions in that vein. What I will do today, though, and I asked Gary to help me a little bit, is I'm going to ask the group questions along the way to see how much do you know or what you can contribute to the program as well. I look for Smokey the Bear. This is not the Smokey the Bear I was raised up with, but it says something. Only you can prevent wildfires. In the chat system, would you please tell Gary how many percent, either 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90%, or 100% of the fires were caused by human activity? And if you could spend a few minutes and do, well, a few seconds really, and send Gary a chat. And Gary, would you then tell me kind of what the responses were?
I'm happy to do that. I'm still waiting. Oh, 60%, 80%, 90%, 50%, 85%. 60%? Any others?
Okay, that's close enough. I must congratulate this group as having really a good handle on how many human activities contribute to wildfires. The roundabout answer is 90%. On this side of the mountains, we have more fires, mainly because we've got more population or more people to start the fires, I guess, than on the other side of the mountain, even though their fires take up more acreage. But 90%. Now, the other 10% is natural. And you look around the area here and you go, natural. Lightning fires and things like that. But the thing of it is, though, those fires are important to the ecology of this area. And what did we do? We came up with only you can prevent wildfires. In other words, no wildfires is a good fire. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. Okay, now Gary's going to have more questions or more responses. What do you think contributes to the wildfires that we are having? What sort of practices are we doing now that may have created an environment more conducive to wildfires? And if you would take just a few minutes and think about it, and I'll ask Gary to read off the responses, and then I'll discuss a little bit more about wildfires. Okay, Gary.
Fire prevention.
Fire prevention. That's a very good one. I don't know if you've even been listening to the television on this issue. We actually don't have enough firefighters, but fire prevention in some situations has caused a problem. And the problem is the fires that we have nowadays are much more intensive because we have not allowed the natural fires to go through our forests. It has created hotter fires, and we actually have created an environment where we will lose trees that normally would have withstood a fire that wasn't so hot. And it's just been a problem. We now have to come up with some sort of a balance of having some fires and not having others. Is there a different response, Gary?
Yeah, there's 5 more. Not clearing underbrush.
Just a sec, Gary, the speaker on my computer here, this is a Wazoo computer, sucks. So anyway, what is another one?
Not clearing underbrush. Debris burning. Camping.
I might have to look at the chats because okay. Camping, okay, those are underbrush, the underbrush that okay. All of this I have looked at. Okay, I'll give you another what we've done to create a fire environment. And that is we've introduced plants that aren't native to the area that now are in our area. Scotch broom is very, very flammable. And it actually, when the fire program came about, Lewis County's grant was based on the fact that we had plants that were flammable in the forest and were going to be a cause of fires. There's what we just went through, this hot air that we had to survive. And as many of you already pointed out, we actually were so hot that the needles on the fir trees were scorched. And if that would have been something that you would have seen in a fire. So the thing is, though, not one thing, climate change is what they call it, but we've got climate change, we've got introduced plants in the area, we have people that are the ones that are causing the fires. And we have to come up with a plan. But anyway, just to give you some of those ideas out there. And it's something that many of us think, oh, it's only one thing, but it's a bunch of things. Next slide. Okay. My slide isn't working. Help. You are sharing a screen. Why aren't we moving? Maybe. Okay, next. We'll do it that way. So today we'll go through a background of what the Firewise program is. That's kind of a name that was developed a few years back. We'll talk about the fire zones, what you should look at around your house. And even though it may not be a wildfire situation, there could be other fires in your neighborhood that maybe you should consider as being a potential threat. We'll look at the different landscaping techniques, and then I'll talk about the fire garden. 1985 was a wake-up call. That was the worst fire season that the country had experienced. Where were most of the fires? Ironically, Florida. They have a lot of grass in their swamps, and it dries up in the summertime. Their soil doesn't hold moisture, and they do have a lot of fires down there. The Firewise community was developed by a consortium of people, the National Fire Protection Association, the government, and other interested entities. Understand, Firewise goes beyond just a program about fire, but it incorporates other agencies. Also, there's more of a push for Firewise to be almost considered a national disaster. I mean, not national disaster, but a disaster on the realm of the lahars, the tsunamis, and things like that. And so we have to call in a bunch of people to actually coordinate the relief from a fire, a wildfire. Wildfire also is caused or is more prevalent because many of us are moving into the country and living in the middle of the forests. In California, we have people that have been through a number of fires, and now the communities have set up certain standards in order to build there. I found it very interesting, and I don't know if all of you are from Washington State, but if you are, Washington State Department of Natural Resources has a lot of information about the program. Now, the Firewise Communities USA is a written program that these communities have dedicated to their fire prevention program. Lewis County isn't listed, but maybe your county is, and it could either be a county level plan, or it could be a city level plan, or whatever plan is out there. The Department of Natural Resources has that information there, and also information on the Firewise or fire prevention programs. Okay, this is the vision statement for the Firewise Communities USA, and they're acknowledging wildfires can be there, but we should also make sure that we don't have loss of life, property, and resources, that we have to have some control over what's going on. And we do, we tend to control. A lot of people tend to never happen, but that's not realistic. Simplicity. And if I'm glad Art's not on the program, and if he is, excuse me, Art, but I'm a simple person. Anyway, the thing is that there are three things that typically need to be available for a fire? One is oxygen. It's in our air. We can't do anything about the oxygen. We can't do anything about the wind. And the wind has been part of our problem as well, because it oxygenates fire. We can't do anything about the topography. A fire tends to go uphill. And so anyway, that is something that is there. We have to have fuel. Well, that's our trees, that's our homes. There's just a lot of things that can burn. And the question is, how do you limit this? What should we do about that? And this we will be able to manage in the way we landscape around our house and the way that we keep our housekeeping around our home outside. And then we have the heat, whether it's going to be something from a burning ember from a cigarette, cars, campfires that haven't been tended properly or are out of control. There's just a lot of things that will start a fire and continue to have it grow. And this is what we've got to look at. So again, this is how we're supposed to be looking at our home: lean, clean, and green. And we'll go over that once I get into the plantings and things like that. Okay, firebrand. That's the burning wood. That's the ember. And in the Firewise community, firebrand is supposed to be a term that you understand. Now, ladder fire is something that is, people don't think about it. When we plant a tree, sometimes we've got to plant stuff around the tree, more bushes and everything like that. The ladder fire can occur in two different ways. One, by the amount of debris or bushes underneath a tree that catches on fire, then eventually reaches the limbs and goes up to the top of the tree, where the canopy then is on fire and easily spreads from canopy to canopy to canopy. Then we have what's the surface fire, such as grass or understory. It's not going up the trees, it's staying lower to the ground. But the best way to think about landscaping is xeriscaping. And it reduces and eliminates a lot of water. Unfortunately, that is another resource that is getting finite. And this is what is very important, is that we look at, okay, what can we sustain? And we maybe considering that I know they're already rationing water in different cities around Washington State, maybe this is a type of landscaping technique that you may want to integrate into your own home. And it depends on where your water source is. I may have a well, but it doesn't mean that I can irrigate acres and acres and acres. I am limited to the amount of water I can use for my plants. A while back, we had a surface fire over in Lewis County, and it scared a lot of people. What essentially happened, it started at a fence line. The fence line is kind of like a fuse. Just it's going to travel down that fence line. And if you have a field that is combustible or because it's dried grass or whatever, it's going to spread. And what happened was it started at the fence line right next to the highway and spread towards the homes that were on the opposite side of the field. Fortunately, they were able to get it out before it went too far, but it did burn some of the landscaping that was around the homes. And I don't know how many of you have ever been around a fire. I personally haven't, but I imagine it was scary for those residents to see the flames in the field and coming towards their home. So surface fires are something that is very common. That's what happens usually along the interstate. And we've had some hellacious fires that have just gone beyond the interstate and into the neighborhoods along I-5 especially. One of the feelings is to have like a rain garden or rocks real close to the house so that you have a little bit of a buffer and it's not going to be burning right there. And here's, someone said that maybe this was photoshopped. I don't know. But for my point of view, it shows what can happen if you design your landscaping properly. This is probably in Eastern Washington. That was brush, and maybe they had a sprinkler system that activated, but there it is. It's pristine in the middle of all of that blackened vegetation. So anyway, fire zones. One of the things that the Firewise community deals with is fire zones, where individuals, but yet we have to come together as a community, just depending on how close we live together. The first fire zone, they say, is 30 feet from the house. So 30 feet from the house, definitely lean, clean, and green. Then you go to 100 feet, it's more casual landscaping, and you have a little closer vegetation. And then of course, 200 to 300 feet from the house. This whole concept of having zones is repeated in a lot of documents concerning Firewise. The amount of distance varies a little bit, but is the concept is what I want you to consider for your own purposes or understanding what Firewise is about. Okay, zone 1. This is the one that's really close to your house. Now, the feeling is 5 foot away from the house, everything should be low flammability or keep it as bare as possible. In fact, I remember trying to sell a house a couple of years ago, and my real estate agent says, you have to get your plants away from the house. And I had to move that out for whatever reason. Maybe people want to walk around the house, I don't know. But anyway, the interesting thing is keep it clean, pretty close to the house. The closer the vegetation is to your house, if an ember or firebrand comes in, it could there could be enough heat if you have enough firebrands coming in, and that vegetation could catch on fire. So the suggested distance is about 5 feet. Now here it talks about 30 feet from the structure. What is the footprint of your house? The footprint of your house is anything that is attached. So if you have fences attached to your house, then that house footprint includes that when you are doing landscaping for the Firewise, with the Firewise program in mind. Additionally, you have decks. And the one thing I can say about decks is if a firebrand comes in and you have trash underneath your deck or something like that, or leaves, and it's possibly combustible, those firebrands could start a fire underneath the deck, and then the deck goes up. And it's even for stairs and things like that. You've got to look at what is around your house as far as what could possibly catch on fire. The typical thing that we're told about is to get rid of the wood piles close to the house. And for some people, it's convenient in the winter time. And then somebody had a suggestion at one of the presentations I attended. They go, put it away from the house during fire season, because then you don't have that potential. I've seen many wood piles. They don't use all the wood. There's leaves on there. There's twigs on there. It just is a fire waiting to happen if a firebrand comes. The other suggestion now is the branches of trees. Cut them up 6 to 10 feet. I don't know how many of you have yard tractors or lawnmowers, but I'll tell you what, those branches hanging down sometimes just kind of can zap you. Well, cut your trees up and you're doing two good things. You're not going to be caught on the lawnmower. And I had one time got underneath a limb and I'm going, oh, I can't go forward. I can't go back. I'm stuck. But anyway, the whole thing is you then are able to cleanly mow underneath that tree. If you have conifers, and they have to be a distance away from the house, or should be, because they're highly flammable. The trees, like I said, we have canopy fires 30 feet apart. And again, that 5-foot situation, make sure that you have that taken care of. And then xeriscaping, and we're going to be looking at pictures too. If you have grass or plants or mulch, make sure you water it, because this will additionally prevent something from catching on fire quickly. I also point out, mainly because on television, they talk about this pine straw. Those are pine needles from a long, they're long needle pine needles. And unfortunately, they're dried. I don't know if you can get them wet enough, but I would be careful about thinking about using that for a mulch in our environment, because of the fact that we do have such a fire danger around here. Okay, the next one, 30 to 100 feet out. Again, now we can add more trees and add more bushes. And they suggest deciduous trees, mostly in zone 1, 2, versus the conifers. But the thing is, though, you can have a mix of things, and it's beginning to look more park-like, I would say. Again, make sure that you trim your trees up. Get rid of all the dried stuff. You don't want to have someplace that's going to end up having an ember going into it. And maybe you even have campfires as well. And those embers could ignite a fire somewhere if you don't keep it clean. Zone 3, 1 to 200 feet. And this could well be your neighbor's yard. Think about it. Is your neighbor going to be a fire risk for you? And maybe you could educate them about the fact that we're sharing this space, and maybe you and I need to ensure that we are not going to create an environment where a fire would easily start. This is fire resistance. So anyway, those are the zones. I'm at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions about the zones, please contact me. There is one reference that I have here from the Department of Natural Resources. It's called Living with Fire. And Gary does have a reference document that he could send you. But anyway, in that document, there's a lot of information about the zones, how far plants are supposed to be apart when they're on slopes. Additionally, how big fires can get, what different vegetation, how much of a flame you get off of it. It's a very interesting document, and you may download it off of the internet. I found it to be a very interesting read because it had explained things a little bit differently than when I had first started looking at the Firewise program. So we're going to look at the difference between two plant types, highly flammable and fire resistant. So you look at the highly flammable. Again, there's the needles more than anything that are highly flammable. Think of the Christmas tree. I don't know if any of you've ever seen a Christmas tree that's been drying in the house and somebody decides to burn it, how fast it burns. But you can imagine a similar thing could happen in a fire situation outside as well. There's things that are flammable. Gary, did you?
Yeah, I did. The references that you spoke of, I just put them in the chat box. So people look in the chat box, all the
Oh,
references
okay.
are there, and they can copy from that.
No
If they send
problem.
an email, I'll do that too, but the references are in the chat box right now.
Okay. So anyway, my references are there. So there's a little things that kind of clue you in. Leaves are aromatic and gummy and resins and all of this stuff, papery stuff. Those are all clues that maybe it's a flammable plant. What I found very interesting, and it's in another document, I'll point it out, that document out too, which one it is. But lavender plants, if you keep them watered, are not considered highly flammable plants, but they're fire resistant. The watering is the clue here. I thought that was an interesting nugget of information. I swear this is almost a picture of the junipers I had in my yard when I was living in Tacoma. You've got dead branches, you've got those dead needles from the plant itself. I'm fortunate it never caught on fire, but boy, oh boy, I know that particular batch of plants was a fire waiting to happen, and I moved out before it ever did, thank goodness. So fire resistant plants. We've got trees and shrubs. The ones that lose their leaves in the fall are usually pretty fire resistant, but we have native vegetation, and some of those don't lose their leaves, but they have been adapted. Like I said, this is a fire climate here, and the native plants have been adapted, and they normally will survive that fire, or they recreate themselves very quickly with seedlings and things like that. They aren't going to contribute a lot to the fire, and it won't be spreading as quickly as those that have the resins and everything like that. They don't have a lot of dead wood dry material. Look under a fir tree, how many needles have been dropped there. And it's going to be interesting after the fall and our next year's growth to see what happens to those Doug firs. And I know there was a spruces in my neighbor's yard, and then the state tree, I keep on forgetting the name of that one. But anyway, a lot of things did get burnt. And it's just one of the things that it was 122 according to my son's thermometer here. So it really was hot. So we look at Firewise plants. the all of a sudden, I think it's gardenia. And then we have the irises, we have the daisies, and then my internet connection is unstable. Thank you very much, Century Tel. Anyway, the daisies, and then I don't know if it's bluebonnets or lupins down there. I'm finding that picture, there wasn't enough resolution to be able to tell which sort of plant it is. So this is the document, Fire Resistant Plants for Home Landscapes. It's pretty old, but you can see three different universities went together and put this together. This was put out right after the Firewise programs were starting to gear up in different areas. And it's a very beautiful book. It's color. And in it, it discussed the fact that you can have lavender. But again, it's the native plants that really stand out as being very good candidates for a fire-resistant landscape. So let's look at some of these pictures here. This one shows a deciduous tree. I don't know how close it is to the house, but the deal with it is if you're going to have a deciduous tree, make sure it's an open network tree like this one. And additionally, the leaves on this tree, actually, if a fire comes close to it, will kind of cool the house. And I think of it like a reaction like the perspiration on people's bodies. Additionally, we don't see it, but there is a green lawn, a fairly extensive green lawn. When I was transferring pictures, putting them on and getting everything in doesn't always work. But anyway, this was an example for you for a deciduous tree. This one I find very interesting. You can see it's almost by the book. There's nothing around the house. It looks pretty bare there, except that for that car. But anyway, they pruned all their trees up. They have plantings that are spaced, and there's the green lawns, as well as gravel paths or sand paths or something, or even sidewalks, some cement sidewalks. They serve as breaks for fires. And consequently, they can be a good thing to use. Unfortunately, water intensive. This is a kind of an example of what someone did next to the house. They put in pavers and rocks, and then a small hedge, and their annuals or perennials there, but they're not very big. So just an idea. This again shows how colorful a xeriscape landscape can look, with the different colored flowers and the paths going through, the rockery. You can have some evergreens, but they're not huge evergreens. They're probably a miniaturized evergreen there. Looks like a spruce of some sort too. But it can look very interesting and create a nice environment around a home. Again, more rockery, and the planting, even though they are not more of a sedum, not spaced very close, but they still have an impact. This is again sedums. Think about it. They're juicy not stems, but leaves. You crush them together, and how much fuel is there left after the water's gone? They're very good to have for a fire-resistant garden. This is Okanagan and Kettle Valley. Again, the paths and the spacing of plants. You kind of have to plan for them to take over certain spaces. One of the things that keep in mind too, some of those silvery plants are very good drought tolerant plants as well. And I read somewhere that actually some of the hairs on those silvery plants provide shade to the plant, and that's why they can survive in drought situation. Okay, this is Salcombe Garden. This is when we first had the Firewise program in Lewis County. You can see that we were able to get grant money. Again, in order to maintain grant money, you have to also keep a program going. And I'm thinking that for some areas, there were decisions made. Lewis County is considered a low risk county. They're on the Department of Natural Resource website. They do have maps that show the counties and how they feel about their vulnerability to wildfires. But anyway, this is the first sign. And this is the new sign because the old sign fell down in the wind. But in the back here, I can't see where it is. But anyway, right behind the building, you can see those bushes. Those are Oregon grape. We have sedums over underneath the locust tree, honey locust tree. And we have some probably firecrackers or plants over there on the left too. I don't remember what they are. I read that garden faithfully, and I don't remember them being there. So maybe they've died since this was since I was there. But anyway, the thing is, though, this is an example for the people. There are a lot of the counties have the extension groups have Firewise gardens as well. There's beautiful ones, of course, east of the mountains. So anyway, this is the what we're demonstrating at Salcombe. Pebble paths, trees, shrubs, plantings aren't dense, mulch is small stones, and yes, that's an interesting thing with that mulch because it is hard to weed, by the way, and a lot of native plants. So anyway, references. The Firewise community, I have, there's just a lot of references in there. If you want to know more about the communities themselves, hazard assessment, how we can be compatible with nature. There's information on homes construction as well. Additionally, we have flyers from Wazoo, and then that document, the 590, which is fire resistance plants. And then Living with Fire is the one account came out of the Department of Natural Resources. I did find something as well out of the department is Woodland, Fish and Wildlife, wildlife friendly fuels reduction in dry forests of the Pacific Northwest. It's interesting. Again, as someone already pointed out, the fact that we have let things to kind of accumulate. We need some of the downed trees and some of the snags and things like that for our wildlife. But the thing is, if we have too much, we're more vulnerable for fire. Now, I'm going to go through just these slides. You can look at them and see the how they have provided the landscaping. Now, this just makes you wonder, oh my goodness. And you can see the green. See the green. They survived. And there must have been a reason why they survived. This is another garden. And again, some of the flowers that you can have some color in your garden and still have a good Firewise garden. Sorry for the resolutions. When you try to blow things up, it doesn't blow up sometimes, or maybe it did blow up. But anyway, this is another area that they provided benches. And another thing, not wooden benches, a stone bench. And again, right next to your house, maybe you should consider, should I have wooden furniture? Should I have things that are flammable next to my house? This is another example of a desert location. Vegetation far apart. And would you want to be in this house? I imagine they evacuated. But that's what some people have had to live with. I'd like to tell you one other thing that has brought up during my Firewise attendance in presentations. The one gentleman, I was doing a class for the small forests group. But anyway, he has essentially said you should have a ditty bag and be ready to go, and 2 exits. And it made sense to me because I know that some of those people at Lake Tapps last year were probably challenged trying to get out of their neighborhoods. And understand that Firewise goes beyond more than landscaping. My hope is that you never have to really deal with a fire, but it's always better to be somewhat prepared and understand why things are the way they are, because otherwise we can't appreciate why we should be ready just in case. Thank you very much.